I read the ANC Manifesto so that you don't have to. Welcome back to Citizen Concerned, where we remind you to beware of the comrades. I'm Katlego and would like us to go through the various political party manifestos in preparation for the 29th of May. Let's start with the biggest issue that is affecting most of us, the economy and jobs. Interestingly, the ANC Manifesto seems to focus on this issue the most. We are covering the ANC in this video simply because they are the ones currently in charge and because we have some people who still plan to vote for the ANC. The truth of the matter is the ANC should not even be an option for anyone who has been paying attention and seeing the harms that they have brought to this nation. Nevertheless, let's start with the ANC, the traitor of the South African people. ANC, the destroyer of lives, economies, and state-owned companies. According to the manifesto, their number one priority is to put South Africa to work. My question is, why was it not the number one priority all along? I mean, in the 30 years they have been in government. Anyway, how they wish to put South Africa to work is the dumbest communist idea that has been around for decades, if not centuries. They seek to put South Africans to work through public employment programs. They even include societal sectors, as if there's anything that comes from that. They have failed to understand one important thing. The government's role is not to create jobs through employment programs. Their role is to create an environment that promotes economic growth and to remove policies that hinder economic growth. It seems the ANC have never understood this, and that is one of the reasons why we are where we are right now. Why the employment and economic status of South Africa is like this. The government is only there to enable the private sector to grow. The government is simply there to ensure that the economy is not hostile towards the private sector.
It's not government's job to create jobs. Government's job is to create an environment where the private sector can function properly. And politicians always confuse so-called jobs. They think if you keep people busy, then you've created jobs, which of course is not true. And that's why politicians, they get 1,000 people to wave flags and they think they've created 1,000 jobs. The only real job creation happens when the private sector voluntarily employ people because they want to employ more people because the economy grows. What politicians need to do is to create an environment where the private sector can grow the economy, and then jobs will be the result as well. So jobs should never ever be the objective. The objective must always be economic growth, and then jobs will happen. So that's the right approach. But of course, we know politicians that want to be elected. They're not really interested in job creation. They're more interested in being elected, and that's what I lie to people.
The ANC promises to create 2.5 million jobs. How? Through a presidential employment stimulus. I'm guessing it will be similar to the one that they started after COVID, which created 1 million short-term jobs. Just to remind us all, the program costs the taxpayer more than 30 billion rand. National Treasury made it clear that there is no budget to continue with this presidential employment stimulus, and maybe that is why the ANC state in their manifesto that they intend to create jobs through non-profit companies. How do you expect to grow the economy by creating jobs funded by taxes? Is that sustainable? Is that economical? Non-profit organizations do not add to the economy. They themselves need donations to survive, hence you cannot expect them to continuously grow without the taxpayer having to fund them.
A recruitment drive to tackle youth unemployment, but it comes at a cost for a government in dire financial straits. Even if the youth are employed at the minimum basic salary of 27 rand 58 cents per hour, it translates to 4,000 rand 412.80 cents per month. That's a wage bill of over 141 million rand per month. The temporary jobs, which last for 6 months, will cost the Gauteng government over 847 million rand. Some have labeled it a political stunt and a job scam. Provincial leaders, however, have refuted this, saying thousands have benefited from the program since its inception in June last year.
I'm sending a message to the Minister of Social Development.
What the ANC is promising are jobs that are unsustainable. They are trying to pull wool over the eyes of the citizens simply to get yet another term in office. They are not creating jobs to add real value, but rather to tick the box that they created jobs. And I hope that you all are seeing through their tricks. President Cyril Ramaphosa has not been using logic and economic understanding to solve the unemployment problem. He's simply throwing money at the problem. And that is why we say beware of the comrades. They have no clue how to fix the problem. They always assume that we need more money to solve problems. Dysfunctional public clinics and hospitals take the taxpayer money and buy new hospitals and establish the NHI.
We've just signed an agreement that will see the Gauteng government buying back 18 private hospitals in our province, and we will convert them to public hospitals so that we are ready for the national health insurance.
Dysfunctional Eskom, SAA, Transnet and other state-owned companies take the taxpayers' money and bail them out again and again. No sitting down, thinking long and hard, inviting those who may know better, get down to the root cause and bring sustainable and economical solutions. No, just throw more and more money at the problems. That's how the comrades work. They say they will increase support for small businesses, especially in townships and villages, and this will create an additional 1 million job opportunities. How? There's no clarity. The truth is there is nothing they can do without throwing money at the problem again. Those businesses will not be sustainable because they will not have real customers paying for services and goods. What we need in South Africa are private companies that compete by supplying goods and services that people are willing to pay for. And by private companies, I'm including the small businesses in our townships and our villages. For those companies to employ millions of people like we want them to, they have to sell their goods and services to South Africans, the African community, as well as the international community. They should make a profit in order for them to survive and continue to grow until they thrive without needing government funding. The ANC Manifesto says they will engage the private sector. My question is, haven't you been doing that already? Instead of engaging the private sector in your 30 years of ANC rule, what have you been doing for the private sector? Well, let's see. You as the ANC have allowed load shedding, potholes, failing railways, failing post office, and these and your many other failings as the ANC have led to the collapse of many companies in the private sector. The only engagement the ANC has done with the private sector is begging the private sector to not retrench people. The fact is, the private sector has had no choice but to retrench because the ANC has made it close to impossible for the private sector to function efficiently due to the nation's infrastructure failures and certain economic policies like BEE. Here again, the ANC, instead of saying we will remove the BEE nonsense, which is racist towards many South Africans, they say they will continue to promote BEE to ensure Black people are represented in business. Whether we want to admit it or not, BEE is a racist policy and it has not led to the economic advancement of many Black people it claims to be in place to assist. Only a select few. I know that BEE is a bit of a sensitive matter, as many of us have been convinced that it's the only way for Black people in South Africa to make it economically. But honestly speaking, who cares if the pilot is Black or white? When you're on a plane, you need to know that the pilot is the best pilot they could find, not the Black pilot they could find. When I go for surgery, I need to know that the surgeon is the best for the job. I'm not going to like hearing that the person I have been given to operate on me was hired because they were black. I want the person to be the best for the job. What about you? What do you care about most? Being served by the best person regardless of race, or being served by a black person whether they are the best or not? Let me know in the comments section below, please. This elevation of race above qualification and skill is the reason we are where we are right now. ANC has been hiring BEE comrades into state-owned companies. Those BEE comrades may not be the best for the job, but they are black and they are ANC affiliated, and that is why they get to have the jobs. Whether they crumble the Department of Health, Home Affairs, Housing and others, the ANC does not care. Whether BEE hiring will result in endangering the lives of people who visit public clinics and hospitals, ANC does not care. Whether BEE hiring will result in unnecessary long queues at Home Affairs for days on end, ANC does not care. Whether BEE hiring will result in the poor being given substandard RDP houses or no houses at all, ANC does not care. That is disgusting, disappointing, and destructive. We need people in positions of power because they are competent, not because they are black. Merit is all that matters. Even in private companies, we all get promoted based on our expertise, discipline, and trustworthiness. But because the ANC's bad hiring decisions do not affect their personal bank accounts, they are comfortable hiring people without the expertise, the discipline, and trustworthiness. That is why you see that the ANC is not very good at hiring the best people for the job. A man like the Minister of Electricity, who destroyed Tshwane with his incompetence when he was in charge there, is expected to fix Eskom. The ANC lunatics promised to advance industrialization with active support for localization and high labor-intensive industries. Do you guys see the foolishness of these people? They are even promising to protect strategic existing industries. Again, you have been here for 30 years. Why will you only do it now? You have failed to protect many industries in South Africa. Chinese products are flooding into South Africa. Many items that should have been made in South Africa by South Africans for South Africans are now being made elsewhere outside of South Africa. South Africa was a big manufacturer before the ANC came into power, but through the ANC, many industries have collapsed because China has been allowed to enter the South African markets with cheap alternatives. How do you expect these local industries to compete against cheap Chinese-made goods? Chinese-made goods are not made by BEE companies. China does not even have a universal minimum wage. Minimum wages are based on the cost of living in each province. In South Africa, the ANC does not even take into account the different circumstances in the areas in which businesses find themselves in. Some of China's provinces even get paid close to what South African minimum wage earners make. How is that possible in a country as poor as ours? The more you raise the minimum wage for workers, the higher the cost of goods and services becomes. A South African consumer would be more willing to order a cheaper item from China than they would be willing to pay the higher price charged by a South African small, medium, and even large company. South Africans have been sending money to China through Shein for years now. Have you as a government not seen anything wrong with that? Clearly not, judging by the number of Temu adverts I keep getting. Left, right, and center, it's Temu, another Chinese company coming here to take money out of South Africa's economy into China. If the government does not do anything about it, soon enough, companies like Temu, Shein, and Alibaba might end up replacing Pep, Mr. Price, Ackermans, and Woolworths, which will result in the loss of jobs for South Africans employed in those shops. A lot of the products you find in these retailers already come from China anyway, so we have a problem. Local shoemakers and clothes manufacturers are fighting against Chinese goods. Does that even make sense? That's the ANC for you. The ANC wants to increase exports. The truth is, other countries will not buy from us if our goods are not the right quality and at the right price. The truth is, South African industries will not get better unless you lower the minimum wage and make sure you protect South African companies from cheap Chinese product imports. What happened to promoting Proudly South African? Again, beautiful principle on paper, but when it comes to action, dololo. Regulate the majority of Chinese products that make it difficult for South African businesses to compete against cheap goods from China. Don't forget to punish the smuggling of goods and counterfeit goods into South Africa. These two actions will help allow for local industries to flourish. Before we continue, what are your thoughts on these points from the ANC Manifesto? Do you think they make sense? Do they give you reason to vote for the ANC? Please comment below and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh yes, they even want to accelerate land reform and distribution. The ANC is full of clowns, guys. Do you remember that they actually promised that they would distribute or redistribute 30% of the land by the year 1999? What happened to that? They wasted and looted the money that could have been used for the land reform and redistribution. By now, they could have owned all the land in South Africa, but this will go down in history as yet another thing the ANC failed in. 30 years later, they have barely done much to acquire the land they promised the South African citizens. Some of the land they have acquired, they are not distributing to the citizens, but keeping it to themselves. Some of the land they have distributed, they have not adequately equipped the new owners, resulting in unemployment of previous farm workers, a decline in the nation's food production, and sadly, an understandable inferiority complex in the new owners. The ANC even promises to tackle the high cost of living. Really? Really? How do you do that when you keep raising the minimum wage? When the minimum wage rises, where do you think the employer is going to get the money to pay his minimum wage earners from? The employer simply raises the costs of food, goods, and services, and this affects all the consumers of those goods and services, including the minimum wage earners. When you hear rise in minimum wage, it sounds great, it sounds noble, like a great win for the employees.
There is no such thing as a free lunch. That's basically all you need to know about economics, or for that matter, about life. Everything comes with a price, and there are no perfect solutions, only trade-offs. If you think you're getting something for free, you're fooling yourself. One way or another, somebody has to pay for it, and that somebody usually includes you. This bit of priceless wisdom was popularized in the 1970s by University of Chicago economist Milton Friedman.
Fact is, all things considered, you are not helping the poor employee by forcing salary increases in an economy that is not growing. These unions that support the ANC also fight to raise the salaries of workers. Where do you think the money to pay the salary increases to those union members comes from? The cost of living continues to increase even for that union member whose salary just increased. So here he is where he was, if not at a worse place. The cost of living continues to increase in a country where unions and the government are always treating employers or business owners like they are the enemy. Check this out for better understanding.
Line up 100 Africans here, line up 100 non-Africans here. Usually they fit into two groups, same usual groups. The Africans and their allies and their non-African allies. You ask them, why is Africa poor today? Why is Africa poor today? Why is Africa poor, the poorest region in the world in 2024? Most Africans and their allies will come up with the usual suspects that side would come up with. Colonialism, slavery, they're stealing our natural resources, racism, yada, 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 yada. The non-Africans who are not allies of Africans would tend to be, or have no compassion or whatever, would tend to say IQ, low IQ. They fight all the time. They're lazy. They're crooks. And both sides would also say bad leaders, bad governance. We talk about all of that stuff. But do you know what I don't hear from either side? No one will say Africa is the poorest region in the world today because it is the most overregulated region in the world. It is a place in the world where it's hardest for any entrepreneurs to do business, period. I don't hear anyone saying it. And you tell me how, if you don't have a right diagnosis, how you get to a right solution.
It does not make sense to pay a minimum wage equal to or close to China when China is ranked as a first world country. Japan is also a first world country, and yet we, South Africa, require a minimum wage similar to Japan as well. That doesn't make any sense. We are a poorer country without enough companies with enough money to pay this minimum wage. Allow for a lower minimum wage to allow for smaller companies to compete. Lower the minimum wage to allow smaller businesses to rise in the different poor communities they find themselves in. Smaller businesses cannot afford to pay minimum wage, and hence they will avoid hiring new employees, or they will simply not even start the business at all. Instead of modifying these regulations to ensure businesses come into existence, the ANC wants to give basic income support grants. Imagine, where's the money for all this going to come from? Just paying people to sit at home. Grants for much of the unemployed people should simply be a temporary solution. It is not a permanent solution. The solution is jobs. The solution is businesses. Instead, you want to give people more reasons to sit at home and get a salary for doing nothing. And who pays? The taxpayer. Meanwhile, there are no new private sector jobs to contribute tax. Meanwhile, roads are not getting built, infrastructure is not being maintained, and everything is falling apart due to a lack of maintenance and high corruption of the ANC and its team of incompetent people. Their manifesto also includes plans to expand subsidized water and electricity. Again, if the water and electricity subsidies keep growing, who do you think is going to pay for them? The taxpayer will have to fund those subsidies. This means higher taxes for people and businesses that are already paying taxes to keep the country going. It also means the cost of goods and services also go up.
If you think you're getting something for free, you're fooling yourself. One way or another, somebody has to pay for it. And that somebody usually includes you.
Whenever expenses to do work go up, businesses will simply make the consumer pay for them. If unions demand increases, employers may pay the increase, but the customer will pay for that increase at the till. The cost of food, of water, electricity, goods and services goes up. So in truth, it is a never-ending cycle. Why? Because the government is not addressing the problem. They simply want more money to subsidize while citizens complain that the food is getting expensive. The ANC wants to regulate rental prices for students, and yet the ANC government owns dozens of buildings that are abandoned and underutilized. Those buildings could be renovated to make them fit for housing students for free or for very cheap. But instead, you want to regulate prices of privately owned buildings. So noble and mighty of you, hey ANC. The manifesto continues to say the ANC will national and provincial governments. The ANC will ensure that it's public. Like, What? Look at the quality of this rubbish document. If they cannot even ensure the quality of how the promises are written, how can you trust them to deliver the promises in a quality fashion? The ANC will national and provincial. Anyway, they have also promised to ensure that their public representatives and employees are held accountable. Yeah, ne? Dear Cyril and team, 30 years of ANC. Were you not supposed to be doing this already? This is basic management 101. They promise to fill critical vacancies with qualified people. What kind of promise is this? You're supposed to fill all vacancies with qualified people, not only critical ones. Come on, man. There's nothing in this manifesto that is even worth your time, South Africans. Take it from me, your friend. Look, they promise to fix potholes. They promise to reinstate all existing passenger and rail lines. Who caused them not to be operational? They want to foster a culture of reading and numeracy. What have you been doing all this time is my question to you, ANC. Everything that the ANC is promising to do is stuff that they should have done and stuff that they should have been doing. If they fail to do it and fail to keep doing it, why should we keep them in power? This manifesto is a fail. ANC only knows that they receive tax money from the private sector, but they have no clue how to run and improve a country or to improve anything. They know that they should spend taxes, but they don't know how and where to spend the money. They are traitors to the people of this nation. Racism is all they know. Apartheid is all they know. The past and blame shifting is all they know. Based on this manifesto review, do not vote ANC. I'm Katlego. This is Citizen Concerned, and until next time, beware of the comrades.